Today, I'm recommending a dark horse-level suspense thriller. It's written and directed by Jordan Peele. In 2017, this film grossed $150 million worldwide and made a huge splash at the Oscars the following year. A few years later, Peele won the Writers Guild of America's award for the best screenplay of the 21st century. With so many accolades, this film is one you absolutely cannot miss. Let's revisit this classic together. The story begins now, spoilers ahead, so proceed with caution. Chris Washington is a photography enthusiast. 4 months ago, he started dating his girlfriend, Rose. They are deeply in love, and Chris is completely immersed in their relationship. One weekend, Rose suggests taking Chris to meet her parents in the countryside. Hearing this makes Chris a bit nervous. He's worried that Rose's parents might treat him differently because of his skin color. Rose reassures him that her father is a neurosurgeon and her mother is a psychiatrist. She promises that her parents are definitely not racists and that nothing Chris fears will happen. So, Chris agrees to Rose's request, and the two set off happily. They chat and laugh along the way, but while Rose is driving, she accidentally hits a deer. Both of them are shocked. The police arrive to investigate the situation. After questioning Rose about the accident, the officers asks to see Chris. This request makes Rose very angry, and she strongly opposes it. Chris feels grateful for Rose's protection. Despite some unpleasant experiences along the way, their spirits remain high. Soon, they arrive at Rose's family home. The yard is large, and the house is grand. Rose's parents warmly welcome them, showing no concern for their different skin colors. This slowly puts Chris at ease, but soon, strange things start to happen. There are two black servants in the mansion. The maid has a very creepy smile, and the groundskeeper's gaze is filled with hostility and coldness. At first, Chris doesn't pay much attention to it. During a pleasant family conversation, Rose's father notices Chris' smoking habit. He mentions that smoking is a bad habit and offers to help Chris quit. Rose's mother can use hypnosis to change a person's mindset. Chris agrees that smoking is bad but politely declines the offer, saying he can't quit on his own. At that moment, the maid comes over to pour tea for everyone. As she pours tea for Chris, her expression suddenly becomes very strange, as if she loses consciousness for a moment and nearly spills the tea. When she snaps out of it, she appears very nervous and apologizes with a forced smile. This bizarre scene leaves Chris feeling uneasy, as if the maid is hiding a huge secret. Just then, a young man walks over. It's Rose's brother. His arrival breaks the awkward atmosphere. That night, Chris can't sleep because of his craving for a cigarette. He goes outside, hoping to have a smoke while Rose is asleep. Just as he's about to light up, a figure comes running toward him. As it nearly collides with Chris, it suddenly changes direction. Chris realizes it's the groundskeeper. The groundskeeper's strange behavior leaves Chris puzzled. It's already late at night. As Chris looks back, he sees the maid standing by the window, touching her hair and staring at her reflection in the glass. This sight scares Chris so much that he loses all desire to smoke. He stumbles back into the house, only to find Rose's mother sitting in the living room, inviting him for a chat. Out of courtesy, Chris sits down. What happens next is very strange. Rose's mother keeps stirring her tea, chatting casually with Chris. The sound of the spoon hitting the cup forms a rhythm. Chris, sitting on a comfortable sofa, has no idea he's being hypnotized. With gentle tones and suggestive hints, he falls into a trance. His expression becomes pain. He remembers how, as a child, he was too engrossed in TV and didn't notice his mother had come home. He feels lifelong guilt, believing it caused his mother's death by not reporting her missing. In the monotonous clinking of the cup, he breaks down in tears, but his body is paralyzed, and his limbs won't obey him. As Rose's mother fades away, Chris' mind is clear, but he's helpless. His body and soul have completely separated. No matter how much he shouts, it's useless. He feels like he's falling into an endless abyss. The next morning, Chris suddenly wakes up. He thinks the previous night's events were just a dream, until he meets the groundskeeper in the yard. The groundskeeper apologizes for scaring Chris during his night run, makes inappropriate comments about Rose's body. Chris finds the groundskeeper's behavior strange and realizes that last night's events were real. When he tries to smoke, he has no desire to. He tells Rose about the incident and insists they leave immediately. At that moment, a group of special guests arrives. It's Rose's family's annual private party, attended exclusively by wealthy white people. At the lively gathering, Chris notices something odd. Most of the guests are elderly couples, all looking very happy and free from any signs of aging or illness. Moreover, they shower Chris with compliments, admiring his good looks and physique, even touching his muscles. Though it seems friendly, Chris feels uncomfortable. To ease the awkwardness, he takes out his camera to take some photos. He notices a familiar-looking black guest and approaches him. However, the guest's stiff demeanor and strange behavior puzzle Chris. A woman joins them, and from their intimate gestures, it's clear they're a couple. When Chris bids farewell using a typical black greeting, the guest responds with a handshake, further confusing Chris. The man not only dressed like a white person, but also acted and behaved exactly like one. Yet why did it make people so uncomfortable? Chris, puzzled, returned to the house. He wanted to call his friend, but as he walked up the stairs, all the guests downstairs suddenly stopped talking. Everyone perked up their ears to listen to the upstairs movement, which was very strange. By this time, Chris had already returned to the room. He discovered that his phone charger had been unplugged. Just then, the maid walked in and said she accidentally knocked it out and apologized. Chris didn't think too much of it and said he wouldn't report her. However, the maid's response left Chris puzzled. At the same time, the maid's face showed an indescribable expression. This scene scared Chris quite a bit. Later, Chris told his friend Rod about the experiences of the past 2 days. Rod immediately said there was definitely something wrong and asked Chris to take a photo of the black guest to check his background. To get to the bottom of things, Chris went downstairs and, during a conversation, took out his phone to secretly take a photo. Unexpectedly, he forgot to turn off the flash. This awkward scene made everyone turn their heads to look at Chris. At this moment, the black guest who saw the flash suddenly started bleeding from his nose. Then his expression became increasingly anxious and uneasy. He rushed over excitedly, grabbed Chris, and shouted loudly for Chris to leave immediately. This hysterical outburst left Chris completely stunned. What was going on? A group of people then surrounded the guest and dragged him away. Later, Rose's father said it was caused by a seizure, but Chris didn't believe this explanation at all. Seeing this, Rose took Chris outside to calm him down. Chris told his girlfriend that he knew what a seizure looked like, and the explanation just now was obviously a cover-up. No matter what, this place was full of weird and strange things, and they had to leave immediately. Meanwhile, in an open field, white millionaires were bidding on an item, and that item was the unsuspecting Chris. After several rounds, a blind old man won the bid. That night, Chris sent the photo he took to his friend Rod. Rod quickly replied with a call. After his investigation, Rod found out that the black guest had been missing for 6 months. Now, the signs at Rose's house indicated that he might have been brainwashed and turned into a pet, obeying the whites. Chris broke out in a cold sweat upon hearing this and decided to escape overnight. He asked Rose to get her bag from the living room while he packed his things. At this moment, a slightly ajar door caught Chris' attention. He walked over and found a red box inside with many photos. These photos were all of Rose with other black people. They were very intimate, obviously her ex-boyfriends. So Rose's claim that Chris was her first black boyfriend was a lie. Continuing to flip through the photos, one showed Rose with the male servant in the house, and another with the maid. No wonder the male servant made inappropriate comments about Rose. At this moment, Rose returned to the room. Chris, being smart, casually dismissed it and pulled Rose to leave. But when they went downstairs, they found Rose's brother blocking the door, waving a baseball bat and saying they couldn't leave. At this time, Rose's parents also came over. Seeing this, Chris felt things were not going well. He shouted at Rose to quickly find the car keys. However, Rose couldn't find them. The eerie atmosphere made Chris explode in anger. Indeed, it was all a conspiracy. Chris was so angry he couldn't speak. Just as he was about to leave immediately, Rose's mother ran the cup, instantly hypnotizing and paralyzing Chris. Half an hour later, in a dimly lit room, Chris woke up from what seemed like a nightmare. His limbs were bound and he couldn't move. No matter how much he struggled, It was futile. Looking around to observe the situation, he tried to find a way to escape. At this moment, a TV turned on. Rose's grandfather appeared on the screen, revealing the truth. He had developed a procedure called artificial immortality, transferring consciousness and memory into another person. However, the procedure had flaws, leaving some original consciousness, causing stiffness in some people. After the procedure, with the cup appearing on the screen again, Chris was hypnotized once more. When he woke up for the second time, the TV turned on again. This time, a blind old man appeared. He told Chris that the surgery would soon begin. But before the surgery, 3 steps must be completed. First, the truth is revealed. Second, the buyer and the host communicate because they will share the same body. Third, deep hypnosis is performed before being taken to the operating table. After hearing all this, Chris felt despair. He never imagined he would end up like this. At this moment, he noticed the cotton exposed in the torn chair. Chris came up with a good idea. As the cup sound appeared on the screen again, Chris pretended to be hypnotized. A few minutes later, the surgery was ready, and Rose's father had already opened the old man's skull. Rose's brother came in to take Chris away. When he unlocked all the restraints, Chris suddenly got up and killed him, taking out the cotton balls from his ears. From this moment, a bloody revenge began. He first killed Rose's father with a deer antler, and, passing through the living room, he killed Rose's mother. Ignoring the search for Rose, Chris found a car and prepared to leave, but the maid suddenly appeared. In the chaos, Chris accidentally hit her with the car. The shadows of his childhood made him not want to have any regrets again. Reluctantly, he saved the maid and put her in the car. Meanwhile, Rose was listening to DJ music, looking for a new target. The wall behind her was filled with photos of her previous boyfriends who had been sold. The maid's screams alerted her, and she grabbed a shotgun and rushed out of the room. The maid was actually Rose's grandmother, and the male servant was her grandfather. Grandma, waking up, knew Chris had destroyed her family and angrily tried to kill him. In the fierce struggle, the car crashed into a tree, killing Grandma instantly. Chris, severely injured, got out of the car. At this moment, Rose, holding a shotgun, chased him, but she didn't want to kill this prey. Grandpa quickly rushed over and tackled Chris, trying to kill him with all his strength. At the critical moment, Chris remembered the flash. He used it, and the black servant temporarily regained control of his body. Turning around, he tripped Rose, took the weapon, and shot her in the abdomen. Chris was shocked by this sudden turn of events. The black servant then chose to commit suicide, perhaps unwilling to continue living this way. Now, Rose's entire family was wiped out. Chris, trembling, stood up and saw Rose, who was on the verge of death, reaching for the shotgun. Without hesitation, Chris stopped her. At this moment, Rose tried to deceive Chris again, just as he softened and wanted to save her. A police car arrived at the scene. Rose quickly waved for help, sensing danger. Chris immediately surrendered, as any wrong move could get him shot. However, it was his friend Rod who got out of the car. Rod had been unable to contact Chris and tracked him here. Fortunately, he arrived in time to wake Chris up. In Rose's despairing and helpless eyes, Chris got into the police car and disappeared into the night. This concluded the film. Honestly, the first time I watched this movie, I was very shocked. The director combined racial issues with horror, satirizing the ugly greed of white people, and declaring that black people are not to be trifled with. Alright, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and follow. Your support is my greatest motivation. Thanks for watching. See you next time.